Hello, Facebook. Hello again. So this is day 3 of my 4 seasons of challenge, and Instagram is now live too. Okay, great. You're working again. I tried to do this yesterday and it didn't work. Facebook, Instagram is down. You all know this. So today is the last day of this 3 series of trainings. The first day we talked about identifying what your passion is, what you want. And then the day after, we talked about how to identify what the blocks are, like the building. Are you building blocks against yourself? Are you building blocks of alignment in what you want? So today, the third day, is going to be about actually making it, implementing those changes, and creating change in your life with your behavior, with your emotions, and your environment, your physical environment. So I call this when you refine and align what's happening with you and what you want. So actually, and two, by the way, I want to clearly introduce myself. I don't really tell you what I'm doing, like who I am. I'm Regina Nanamaker, and I help women who are feeling stuck and stagnated sort of reframe their perspective and their mindset so they can stop being paralyzed by their limiting beliefs, and so that they can go after what they want with clarity and then make shifts happen for themselves. That's what I do. That's how I work. So let's get back to it. This is the third day. So we've already identified what it is that we're passionate about. How do we get our passion back? And then we looked at, what was the second one? Passion, what's in our way? What's blocking us? And today is how to make those changes. So you're refining your core beliefs. What we did in the step 2 was looked at the core beliefs and our limiting beliefs that stop us from going after what we want. So this part is going to be refining those beliefs to make them more aligned with what we want for ourselves. So if we have a belief such as we can't do this, or we're not, this type of thing isn't for us, or these opportunities don't come for us, or we're not good at something, we're going to fail at something, it's refining and reframing the narrative around those beliefs. So once you understand where those things come from and why they're there, you can just adjust them and reframe those beliefs so that they are in alignment with what you want, and so that you can then go after exactly what it is and how you want them. And it also means you have to start to change your environment. You might start to pick some things, some people out of your environment. As you're changing your thoughts and your behaviors, you also have to change the things that encourage your thoughts and behaviors, which tend to be the people around you as well. So that could mean friends, family, co-workers, neighbors, the interactions that you work with in that sense. And so once you understand, or maybe think this person might not be the best for what's aligned with me right now, what I want in my life, you need to start to minimize your time around those people. You need to start to minimize the energy that you spend with these people in these places or in these thoughts. Your focus, minimize your focus on these things, but you have to be cognizant and aware of what these things are and who these people are. Another point of starting to actually change and implement what it is that you want in your life and get in alignment is doing the things that you've been avoiding, doing the things that you have, where those blocks were stopping you from. Maybe you thought you were avoiding it because you didn't feel like it, or maybe you thought you were avoiding it because it was hot outside, or maybe you thought you were avoiding it because it just wasn't the right day, or nobody's around. Just do the damn thing. Do the damn thing. Instagram, Facebook, do the damn thing. You just do it. Get over that. That's one of the biggest ways to get past your blocks and jump over your blocks and your hurdles. To hurdle over your blocks. You just do it. No matter how fearful you are, take your fear along the ride with you. Fear can be in the passenger seat. Fear can be in the trunk. It can be strapped to the roof. Just don't let it drive you. Your fear can't drive you. It can come along. It has to come along. It's not going to go anywhere like that. But don't let it drive the car. Don't let it drive you. So, and in the space, or in the dynamic of removing things from your life, you also have to put things into your life. Good evening. How are you? Fanira, am I saying that right? Fanira? How are you? I'm talking about right now how to make changes in your life permanently. I'm talking about what you need to take out of your life, meaning the people, the places, the focus that you have, the thoughts that you have, and then how to put things back into your life. So you need to actually implement things in your life as well. Once you start doing the things, just forcing yourself to do the things that you were afraid to do or that you thought wouldn't work out for you, and dealing with whatever backlash or whatever consequence comes with that, you also have to start implementing these things, whether that be meditation or whether that be finding people who are doing the things that you want to do, finding people who have accomplished the things that you want to do, talking to them, making them in your circle, feeling and stealing their energy, steal their vibes, steal all those things, and make sure that that's what you are injecting into your brain. Because we go around we live by default, and we're just allowing things to get into our minds and affect how we think and how we live and what we believe. And then we only act on what we believe. So when we start to purposely and deliberately place things in our mind that's for us and in alignment with what we want with ourselves rather than what we feel like we just have to have because that's the way it's supposed to be, then things start to change for us in the way that we want them to change. So once we get the people out of our lives, it could be family. Sometimes it's hard to have to remove certain family members from your life, but you know they're not on the same wavelength. And the more you hang out with them, the more that you keep these cycles and patterns going with family members or coworkers, that it's not going to help you, and it's taking away from the energy and the focus that you want to get shit done for you. Clearly, like that, and that's just bluntly how it is. You need to take out the people, even if you love them. You can love them from a distance. And sometimes that's the best way to show that you love them, and the best way that they can show that they love you if they can't get in alignment with you is to let you go and do your thing as well. So along with maybe finding the people and starting things like meditations. And I like to have people set their own mantras. So get your own personalized mantras and affirmations in your head, because when you sort of just adopt someone else's, it might mean something in the moment, but it's not specific to you and what you want. So from step 2 days ago, when you have those limiting beliefs, reframe them completely, because that's yours, it belongs to you. Reframe that completely, and then you have something else that belongs to you that gets you going, that fires you up, that does the opposite. The one made you stop, the one will make you go. So that's what you need to do. You need to make a personal affirmation for yourself and what you want that leads you and pushes you and lights a fire under you to go and do what it is that you want, regardless of if you're fearful. Because fear isn't something that should stop you. Fear can come with you, but don't let it drive you. So it's also setting boundaries. So like I talked about certain people, there's things in our lives that are in place that we don't want to be there. There's things in our lives that are in place that we just sort of deal with because we think we have to. But guess what? No, you don't. No, you do not. Not in here. Not up in here. You don't have to deal with that. No. So setting boundaries is another way for you to completely say, listen, if it's a mother-in-law, if it's a sister, if it's the cousin, if it's a neighbor, and you allow them to cross lines, habitual line steppers that we have in our lives here, we have to just say, hey, guess what? I don't like this. I need for you to stop doing this. If we're going to continue to be and interacting however we are, whatever it is, this is what I want. This is what I need. Or else, guess what we got to do? We just have to cut it off, or just really minimize the time and interactions you have with somebody. You do not have to give somebody all of you. You do not have to say hello to somebody every time you see them either. You do, or you can just say hello. You don't have to engage in conversation with somebody just because they're in front of you when you know that you're not getting anything from them. If you're not getting anything from them, it's going to lead you to wasting time and energy. Then you don't have to do it. Hi, hello, keep it moving. And journaling. So journaling is also something that you want to implement. And you want to do this because it helps you troubleshoot your own mind. Journaling helps you become your own therapist in a way. So once you learn how to journal and you learn how your patterns work, kind of loops that you create for yourself, you can learn to stop them. So say if you have a loop with three points in it: trigger, response, and trigger, response, and what is the word I'm looking for? Trigger, response, and consequence. Trigger, response, consequence. So once you have the trigger and you know your response and there's a consequence, if you don't like that consequence, you then need to change your response. You can't always change the trigger. The trigger is going to be there. You can't change what people do around you. The trigger is going to be the trigger. However, you do not have to respond the way that you respond. So you stop that response in this loop. You change the response, and then the consequence then changes. The reactions of the individual then changes so that you don't have to respond in the same way. So you have the trigger, your response, and the consequence, and you can change the consequence. You can change what happens, this overall reaction, the overall circumstance, if you change how you respond to it. So knowing how you respond, knowing the other ways you can respond. This is all how you can journal. The different ways that you can respond. You can go over the situation in your head. You can say, this is what actually happened. And yet you then go, this is what I want to happen next time. That you can write down a plethora of things where you can actually do besides what you did that ended up in a circumstance that you did not want. Right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? What are you saying, Finera? You said people don't like boundaries. Whenever I set boundaries, that normally end up to ending the friendship or relationship. And that means that relationship or friendship wasn't for you because you shouldn't be the one uncomfortable in the relationship. Does that make sense? If people are habitually crossing lines, line steppers, that doesn't mean that you should be the one that is suffering or who gets the short end of that stick, right? There's plenty of people and plenty of relationships that you can engage in that doesn't end with you being the one uncomfortable. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense to you, because I think that's really important to understand. Relationships end. Like relationships, I say, are seasons. People come into our lives in seasons, and they don't have to stay the whole time. Sometimes we allow people in our lives to stay way too long. We know, especially as women, we allow people because we see potential in people and we can see what they can be. Yet that we don't see that, like just because we imagine these things, but we don't actually see it. But we're living by what we imagine rather than in our reality, because it's easier in our heads and the thinking about what could be and thinking about how people could be doing things rather than how they're not doing things. Right, but let me know if that makes sense to you. Where relations, okay, good, because we are not here. We are not living in this space in time so that we can be uncomfortable. And there's too many people who will treat us well. And there's too many people who do understand what we want and what we need for us to just fiddle around and continue in these relationships. These are the toxic cycles I talk about, simply because we're used to them or simply because it's familiar. That's what happens, especially, I bring up family because especially with family, people feel obligated to be in these relationships because they're your family. But guess what? Families are just humans. They're just humans that we share more DNA with. Like, really speaking, if you want to take away just objectify completely, they're just humans that we share more DNA with. And just like we grow apart with other people, just like we have different opinions from other people and we don't jive too well together, the same thing. It's the same thing. We can love from a distance. We cool, but you're going to be over there and I'm going to be over here doing my thing because I don't need anything interrupting what's happening with me. Especially if you have children in your own family, you want them to see you being at your best rather than you being stressed out trying to deal with this and deal with that. So that is, yeah. And relationships ending makes so much space for other relationships to begin. When you feel a resistance to doing things that you used to do, that's spirit. That's the new you pulling, saying, let's go this way. Like, I have so much more for you in store over here. Forget about those relationships that when you get the short end of the stick all the time, there's so much more that's about to pop off for you that you can't even imagine. But you need to take away that energy that's being spent negatively, or that energy that's being spent in ways that just isn't going to get you anything that you want. So I talk about mantras. Oh, and physical expressions, like our physiology and our psychology are so aligned and interconnected, right? So in my retreats or in my workshops, I do exercises with people where I have them go into positions because our body has memory, like our muscles remember things. So if you go into a position where you're hunched over and your head's down, and maybe your knees, maybe you're into your knees and your head's in your legs. If you try to feel happy and excited in that position, is really hard to do. Just like reverse, if you bring your chest up, arms out on your hips, the Wonder Woman position, head up, things like that. Smiling, it's really, really hard to feel sad and depressed or angry in that way. It's hard to do that because your body literally changes with your emotion. So if you find yourself, if you notice that your body 10 hours of the day is in this position here, and whether you're at work, doing this kind of thing, or no matter what you're doing, some people just have bad self-esteem. One of the quickest turnarounds I've seen, I used to work with eating disorders. One of the quickest turnarounds that I saw was when I had someone do postural work where they changed how, like, just their positioning of their shoulders. It was shoulders, rib cage here. And it was like magic. It was wonderful. I loved it. So I loved it. She liked it, but it was so that for me to see that change and to know, you just see people and you can know how a person thinks about themselves in the world by their posture. I'm sure you've seen someone who's been completely hunched over and they don't really think a lot of themselves. They don't think highly of themselves. They don't think highly of their circumstances or what they're in. You've seen people who are completely full of themselves, they're just all about here and I'm the shit, that kind of thing. And it's not always true. Just like it's not always accurate if you have a high self-esteem, it's not always accurate if you have low self-esteem, but your body positioning is very aligned with how you think about yourself and the world around you. If you're scared of the world around you, that's what you're going to do. You're not going to be into it and give your vulnerable body position to a world that you're afraid of, that you're scared of. So that is another thing. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing any comments here. Oh, Pamela. Hey, Pamela. Hey. I missed some of the comments. Okay, cool. So I talked about journaling, physical expression. Oh, and actually, so another part of this too is making permanent changes is talking to, I say your parents because normally your parents raised you, but it could be someone else who's significant in your life. But talking to them and telling them exactly how they've impacted you, whether it's good or bad. Most of the time, if it's something that's a little bad, it's a relief, and you can relieve yourself from those feelings or that burden that you feel that you might not even know are actually weighing you down and creating blocks for you, maybe you're interpreting something in your head, thinking that I can't get these things because maybe, so my case in point, my father, love him dearly. He was an awesome guy. Like growing up, he told me, if you like it, I love it, that kind of thing. So he's great. And this man told me, I said to him when I was younger, I want to be a chef. He said, you can't be a chef because you're Black. I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Right? But what do you mean? What do you mean? That's so limiting. That's so limiting. And from his perspective, of course, you want the best for your child, and he knows how the world works from his mind, being born in the 60s. That's not really what he's seen, and he knows that that's not really how it works. But yet, for me, being born in the 80s, and then for me to be, if I was to be a chef, it would be 2000 something. I could be a chef being Black, Dad. Like, what are you talking about? That's terrible, right? That's terrible. And like that, so that's what I'm talking about. So that wasn't like a huge for me, but that's an example of how someone can inject into your brain from your parents these limiting beliefs and you don't even realize, So being able to, if you can actually, so from step 2, it was actually realizing 2 days ago, it was alive 2 days ago. You can go back and watch it, it's still up. But 2 days ago was understanding the limiting beliefs and where they came from and actually giving them a voice and knowing where that voice came from and being able to go to that voice to then wherever it came from and say, this is how you've impacted me. And to release that shit, to let it go, give it back to that person because you don't need it. You don't need it. So that's another thing that I have people do when they work with me to really dig into and relieve and release all these blocks and these barriers. Let them go. let them go. And then the next part, I'm not going to go live about the last part of this, because the last part is simply just creating a plan and going after it, maintaining everything that I talk about in this third step, maintaining those things with consistency and accountability for myself or someone else, and creating the plan and going after that plan and making that plan work. So that's step 4. I want to make sure I covered all the points that I wanted to cover for today. Your parents, doing things that you're scared of, whether it be take a class, physical expression, journaling, setting boundaries with people, your environment, work, finding new people, finding the people and the places and the things, whether it be through YouTube or groups, or finding the people and places and the things that are aligned with what you want in your life. If you don't have anything positive telling you, yes, you can be a chef if you're Black, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to go after it, right? So you want to make sure that you inject these things in your life that you want to be in your life. If you want them in there, and they're not there by default, because half the time it's not there by default, because we grow up in such a limiting and restricting mindset environment that everybody does for the most part. So you have to deliberately make them there. I say you live by deliberacy, not by default. Don't live by default. Living by default will just have you in limbo and have you putting out fires all over the place when things pop up in your life. So don't allow shit to pop up in your life. Just put things where you want them and act on them as you want to act on them, right? That's how you create the life that you want. This is how you get past these limiting beliefs that you have, and you create life as you want it. You do it deliberately, not by default. So again, Regina Nanamaker, and I help women who feel stuck and stagnated troubleshoot their mindset and change their perspective so that they can stop being paralyzed by the limiting beliefs, so that they can go after what they want clearly and make shifts happen for themselves. Yes? All right. So I am going to exit. Is there any other questions from Facebook? If there's no other questions, I will then exit. And of course, if there are any other questions, you can always send me a message or anything of that sort. And I will exit, and goodbye, guys.